Flanders to attempt to ride 59 of the famous bergs in a single ride and see if we can complete Flanders in a day. This is known as the Flandrien Challenge and has been created by cyclinginflanders.cc. And there's a dedicated video on GCN of us attempting the challenge that you can check out. But in this one, I'm going to go through the bike and kit that I used and suggest and give you an advice on what you should use if you want to try it yourself. And you can do, because anyone can have a go at this challenge and it's free. The bike and kit you use for a ride like this is super important because it's incredibly grueling terrain that you're riding in. It's often mixed weather in Northern Europe. You also throw cobbles into the mix, and the length of the ride in this particular instance of doing it in one go, it's just seriously challenging. So I've opted for the Orbea Orca Aero I've got, and the reason why I've gone for an aero bike, even though there's loads of climbing, is because, well, the science is clear. It will make me slightly quicker over the length of an entire ride. And I don't want this ride to be any longer than it needs to. It's going to be tough enough. And an aero bike has a distinct advantage, even when you're going at sort of lower speeds. I average 26 kilometers an hour for this ride, but even at that speed, an aero bike is giving you an advantage. I've also got the Aero integrated storage compartment on the bottom of the bike here for spares. This isn't UCI legal, but they have no jurisdiction here. I haven't opted for the integrated Aero bottle though, because its capacity is not that high, and I wanted 2 bottles because it is such an epic ride. So I put 2 standard round elite bottles in normal cages on the bike for that. Having done the ride yesterday, you can see dust on the bike in several places from all the cobbles, which I think is pretty cool. Now, because this ride is so long and we were doing it in October, daylight hours are quite a bit shorter, so we needed lights. Fortunately, Lightskin stepped in and provided us with this really cool front light. So it's called the Naka Road, and you'll notice it's got quite a curious shape. That's very deliberate. It's designed to be aero. Now, you guys know how much I love aero. So it's been aero tested and designed to be really sleek. It fits nice underneath your head unit with just sort of a standard GoPro mount. But they've measured its drag coefficient, and they say that at 45 kilometers an hour, it consumes only 0.48 of a watt. So, well, considerably less than some of the sort of more standard big bulky lights that you're used to that would, well, be much less aerodynamic. And as I said, you know, anything that makes a ride like this that bit easier when it's so long, I will take. I don't want it to be any harder than it needs to be. It's got a nice aluminium body as well for heat dissipation. But that's not all. It's got a special beam pattern, this light, which is a cool bit of tech. So this is important. It's actually something that's a law in some countries to have this beam pattern, and it's so that it doesn't dazzle oncoming riders or drivers. And I just think that's a really good safety feature to have in general on your front light. Now, it's 520 lumens, and that lasts 1.5 hours on maximum mode, but it can go up to 7 hours on some of the less powerful settings. But you can also charge it on the fly via a USB-C adapter on the back. And there's a pretty cool detail whereby there's a rubber seal on the back that can actually turn and spin round to reveal the USB port and make that charge port accessible. While I'm in this region, we'll talk about my head unit as well. So I've gone for the larger Wahoo Roam instead of the smaller Bolt because it's got, well, much longer battery life. It's 17 hours instead of 15. It's got more memory and it's better for navigation, which is kind of key on this challenge because I needed to find out where all the segments were and make sure that I hit all of the different bergs. Speaking of which, there's Strava segments for every single berg that have been created as part of the Flandrien Challenge by Cycling in Flanders. And I'd loaded them, I'd starred them and loaded them all into the device. So every time I hit a berg, the Koppenberg or whatever, they all popped up on the screen, which was really cool and really useful to see. There are GPX files on the cyclinginflanders.cc website if you want to get routes to have a go at the Flandrien Challenge. You can also do it over 3 days or 4 days if you want, and they've got GPX files for that, so you can put those on. Now, fueling and nutrition, super important on a ride like this. And I was aiming to have at least 80 grams of carbs per hour. So I had 11 and a half hours ride time and burnt nearly 7,300 calories. So in my bottles, I was filling them with beta fuel. So that's 80 grams an hour just from one bottle. But because it was quite cold, I wasn't using that much fluid and I wasn't sweating that much. So I didn't want to take all of my fuel from bottles. It was just too much liquid. So the other thing I was having was beta fuel gels and also the jellies, which I'm a big fan of, and also just some solid food along the way. I stopped and had a sandwich as well. But I tend to adjust my fueling strategy depending on the sort of temperature really. If it's a really hot day, I often just take all my fuel from bottles. Speaking of the temperature, you know, being October, we've been really lucky with the weather, but it can always be mixed here. So if you're doing a long ride as well, you know, you're starting in the dark, it's going to be colder when the sun's down. You're going to want to have some pretty flexible clothing options. So I'd really recommend using arm warmers, leg warmers. You know, gilets in this part of the world are great. And also, you know, like a rain cape and stuff like that. Plus, the classic casquette. I mean, that's a Flandrien essential, isn't it? But you guys sort of know that sort of stuff. But yeah, that sort of kit I'd recommend. And well, with regard gearing on the bike, that's really important. I think on a ride as long as this, I'd always say, whatever gears you think you need, take something easier than that. Because it's hard to imagine how tired you are towards the end of it. And with super steep climbs like the Kemmelberg coming at the end, oh, like, you know, I want easy gears for those steep cobbles, because on cobbles, especially if they're wet, you sort of have to remain seated so that you're not spinning your back wheel out the saddle, because it's hard to have traction even with 30s on. So something that you can stay seated, you know, you're going to want easier gears. I actually didn't have as easy gears as I wanted. I've got an 1130 12-speed Shimano cassette on here. If I'd had my pick, I would have gone for the 1134. However, supply chain issues, I couldn't get hold of one in time, so I had to go with the 1130. I've got a 5236 at the front, and I did cope with this, but I would have found it easier if I'd had that 1134. Also got the Quark power meter on here with 170 cranks and Wahoo Speedplay pedals, which are sort of what I use all the time. Now, tyres, big, important, right? Because you're riding on the cobbles. So I've gone for 30mm Pirelli P0s, because that's the maximum I can fit in this bike. And I've got those running with latex inner tubes for lower rolling resistance. And also they're running at 50 PSI. Now for reference, I'm 69 kilos at the moment, but that was fine. Got no punctures throughout the day. I would have liked to have run tubeless, but the only tubeless tyres I had when I was prepping my bike for this challenge were 26mm. So I wanted wider ones, so I went to clinchers with inner tubes. But yeah, worked absolutely great. Now there are things on my bike, the bars, I like narrow bars, run them all the time. So these are 38s. I just get along with those and a bit more aero. So that's what we've got there. And the saddle is my standard Selle Italia SLR Boost, which I run on all my bikes, love it, even have one on my TT bike. I've also got a 120 stem on there if you're interested. But I think, well, I should do a free up sound check on the Jura Ace C50s, then we're pretty much there, I think. So if you've got any questions about the bike, kit or setup, let us know in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Running smooth, I'm impressed with that. They are running really nice and smooth, especially after the battering that I gave them yesterday on the cobbles. Well, there you go. If you'd like to have a go at the Flandrien challenge, head over to cyclinginflanders.cc and you can check it out there. And remember, it's free for anyone to do it. You can just turn up, give it a go. And well, I'm going to go have a waffle and a beer now. So love you, bye.